Thank you. I do really appreciate sitting with you all on Sundays. I sit every day, and that's nice. And I have a little sangha here in the way of two dogs that like to sit zazen with me. But sitting with you guys is wonderful, so thank you. So I have a problem with books. And it's probably one of the fun connections I had with Roshi, in that he was a mad collector of books, and we would talk about books that he would buy and recommend, and of course when he would recommend books I would buy them so that we could talk about them, and it got out of hand and I've had to cull my library more than once. And upon his passing, Lars and Carrie said, you can have all of his Zen books. And that's turned out to be something like 16 or 18 cases of books, and I can't take them. It's just too much. I just don't have space. My house, while a nice house, is kind of spare, and stacks of books would just, no, it would not lend to marital bliss. So I've had to turn them down. Apparently they're going to sell them in order to help pay for Linda's care, and I feel good about that. But to see them go away is like tugs at my heart. But one of the things over the years that I consistently did with Roshi was have conversations with him about Dogen and Dogen's writings. And so I have to say that I've been reading Dogen for easily 20 plus years. Luckily, having conversation with Roshi about his writing for about 20 years. And I don't know if I'm alone in this, I suspect not, but originally he made 0 sense to me. It was just too hard a chew for me to really understand. I would plod through them dutifully and so on, but it was difficult. And I will say that even after 20 years of reading him, he still challenges me deeply. So when reading Genjo Koan, Instructions to the Cook, the Waters and Mountains Sutra, and especially Uji, it's been pretty much of a slog. And I have to say that most of my deeper understanding of his writings has come through to me via commentaries on individual fascicles that I've read. Shohaku Okumura, Daido Luri, others. They've all been very helpful for me to kind of unpack what Dogen is offering. And I don't think I would have the appreciation for Dogen were it not for those commentaries. But I actually, and dare I say this without, being crazy, I'm starting to think that I'm becoming a lot more, or a bit more able to grok what Dogen is saying as time and repeated readings have come and gone. Of course, this may just be a fantasy, honestly. But I've learned a few things about how he wrote and how he presented his understanding of the Dharma. And it's been a matter of, I will read a paragraph and then just sit with a day or two and so on and so forth, and help myself unpack it. But and I have to say that my thinking about how he writes is certainly not foolproof. But these things have helped me to not necessarily to be a Dogen expert, but to read his work with less trepidation and the ability to glean at some things that are actually useful to my practice and to my life, and not to walk away from a reading session goggle-eyed and lost, if you will. I know I've spent many years doing that. So what I've come to understand, and most importantly, is that Dogen rejects what we might call static reality. Static reality. When we hear the term reality, we usually assume something like this. Things exist first, that they have stable identities, relationships happen between already existing things, and actions express what things already are. And this is how substance-based thinking works. A chair is a chair, time flows past it, a person sits on it, end of story. But Dogen thinks this way of seeing is the root delusion because it assumes fixed essences in the 10,000 things, as well as a background time, such as time moves from the past to the present to the future. And as a subject observing an object, which stabilizes our sense of separateness. This is important. That's why he constantly destabilizes nouns when he's writing. So as I read his work, I believe I have found 3 ways that Dogen sees reality. Okay? They can be listed as dynamic, relational, and enacted. Dynamic, relational, and enacted, and I'll talk about that. So, in regards to dynamic reality, reality is activity, not stuff. For Dogen, nothing is in the sense of being frozen. Being equals doing. This comes out everywhere. Time is time being. Buddha, nature is not something you have, but something that you enact. And enlightenment is not a state, but continuous functioning. In fact, his longest fascicle in the Shobogenzo is one called continuous practice. When Dogen talks about a mountain, a moment, or a self, he treats them as events, not objects. That's important. So when he rewrites Buddhist terms, he's pushing them from what is it to how does it function right now. So dynamic reality, is it a functioning thing? Okay. So here's a few concrete examples. Zazen is not a method to reach awakening later. Zazen is awakening happening as we sit. Second thing that I've understood about Dogen's idea of reality is it's relational. Nothing exists by itself. Everything is in relationship. Dogen rejects the idea that things have independent existence, and they can stand by themselves. And this is something that we talk about in practice in regards to a non-solid self. But he refers to this selflessness in regards to everything. Everything. A thing is only what it is through its relationships. But this is deeper than everything is connected. For Dogen, a moment exists only through other moments. A self exists only through the 10,000 things. Practice exists only through conditions, teachers, lineage, posture, breath, time. There is no isolated unit you can point to. That's why he often writes sentences that seem grammatically strange. Subject and object blur, agency shifts, and verbs act without a clear doer. He's not being poetic for fun. He's refusing to refreeze relational flow into fixed grammar. Everything is moving through relationships. I think he does this sort of to blow up our heads, or at least our previously held concepts. And so when you read Dogen and you go, what the heck? That's what he's trying to get you to do. And that's important. So again, some concrete examples of this relational aspect of reality. You do not sit Zazen. Zazen sits you. The room sits. Time sits. This, to Dogen, is relational reality. So in the third way of seeing reality by Dogen is enacted. Reality only exists as lived practice. Okay, this is very important. For Dogen, reality is not something you observe correctly or conceptualize accurately or agree with intellectually. Reality only exists as it's enacted. You know, we've heard this idea that we are making up the world as we go. That's what he's pointing to. This is why he insists on posture when we sit, ritual precision when we're doing services, monastic forms. There's whole sections in the Shobogenzo on how you wash your hands, wash your face, go to the restroom, so on and so forth. And exact conduct. Not because forms are sacred in themselves, but because truth only appears through enactment. This is an interesting aspect. Truth only appears through enactment. If Buddha nature were a thing, you could possess it. But because it's an activity, you must do it. So you must enact Buddha nature. It's not something inherent in here that we're trying to get in touch with, etc. It's a function of movement, activity, engagement, relationship. Here's some other concrete examples in regards to this idea of enactment. Impermanence is not a doctrine. Okay? Impermanence is a fact that this breath is happening now and will not happen again. To know impermanence is to breathe this breath fully. So why does this matter for reading Shobogenzo? When Dogen shifts the meaning of a term mid-fascicle, he's not contradicting himself. Because this is something I struggled with for many years. I thought I had an idea from what he was saying, and then he says something different, or turns it around, or turns it inside out. He's showing that reality cannot be captured all at once. Understanding must stay responsive. Practice must stay alive. If a concept becomes fixed, it has already died. And an image came to my mind when I was coming to this understanding, and that is, imagine yourself, I have a friend up in Duluth, Minnesota, and the Great Lakes, Lake Superior, where he can see it out his window, is this solid sheet of ice. People have houses out there, little ice houses for fishing. They drive their vehicles out there. I mean, it's crazy. I don't think I could ever do that. But imagine having that mindset that this is solid enough to drive out there and spend a day sitting in a house fishing. Your relationship to that thing that we call water has moved into a very fixed, solid, I can do this. This is okay. This works. But imagine, and there's videos out there of when the ice gets thin and cars start falling through, and this happens fairly often apparently. Imagine suddenly the ice is breaking up that you're standing on, you're on an ice floe, pick some size, 50 feet across, 10 feet across, I don't care. Your relationship to what's underneath you shifts entirely. And that's what Dogen is doing to us. He's breaking up the solidity of our ideas and making them move, so we have to be in constant change in order to function. That's why Buddha nature is sometimes all beings, sometimes no beings, sometimes fence, wall, tile, pebble, sometimes just sitting. Each usage enacts reality differently. So I recognize this is a lot. Dogen definitely can be a lot. But wading through all of this can help us to make his writing open new understandings of what this practice is about and what it offers us. Again, reality is dynamic, it's relational, and it's enacted. Those things. All of this is to help us understand a fascicle that I've been reading for a few weeks. So this is why I'm leading, where I'm leading to in this. And yeah, it takes me weeks to read a fascicle. This is not an evening's fun. It can take me a long time to grok what Dogen is telling me. So I want to refer to fascicle number 24, in Kazuaki Tanahashi's translation titled Shobogenzo, the Treasury of the True Dharma Eye. And this fascicle is called Gyobutsu Igi, or Awesome Presence of Active Buddhas. Awesome Presence of Active Buddhas. So in that title, Gyobutsu Igi, Gyobutsu, the term translates as active Buddhas. Okay? And Igi can be translated as dignified manner. Dignified manner of active Buddhas, or awesome presence of active Buddhas, as Tanahashi translates it. This essay is about Buddhas who are performing the work of a Buddha in the world. Actual Buddhas who are active. Gyobutsu are not static or dull, but lively, vital Buddhas. So again, Igi means dignified presence, or maybe decorum, implying that there is an inner dignity. Okay? If you are looking at a person with a dignified presence, they have some sort of an inner state of dignity that they project, that we can see, that we respond to. Igi is really about our inner posture, not necessarily our exterior shape, form when we're sitting, but our inner posture, which we form and learn in Zazen. Returning again and again to this possibility of sitting upright and finding our inner dignity. This whole idea of when you sit and maintain form, and Dogen is very insistent on having proper form, we embody this inner dignity. Okay? So by doing prostrations, bowing, sitting upright, we start to connect with this inner dignity and respectfulness, this inspiring, awesome presence. Realization as an embodied practice. This doesn't mean that we become Zen zombies, working to follow the forms perfectly as if they were the main purpose of this practice. Meizumi used to refer to this as having as a way of being, as having the stink of Zen. But it is about discovering how, entering deeply into this practice, we can find ourselves. We explore how this body-mind, right now, takes on this expressive presence, this inner dignity. Each of us has his or her own particular way of expressing the awakening heart, mind, and inner dignity and presence on our seat right now. So if you were to kind of step outside yourself and see yourself sitting on the cushion during Zazen, in this posture that we're all very familiar with, whether you sit cross-legged, full lotus, seiza, it doesn't matter. It's that question of how you say, this is how I am as I practice being alive. It can take a while, and actually this practice of our realizing our inner dignity is endless. Try to find that dignity and allow it to open up and blossom in our life. But it is what we have the opportunity to do when we sit. You know, athletes, here we are in Olympics, athletes do the same thing over and over and over and over and over in order to be very good at that, to the point of being the best in the world. We sit over and over and over and over to be this dignified individual. This practice is not some method by which, if you log enough hours on the cushion, then eventually in the future something called awakening will appear. Buddhas do not wait for awakening. The actual active, lively, performing Buddhas know that awakening does not happen later as a result of spiritual practice. There is no enlightenment that is not practiced. Enlightenment, if it is truly enlightenment, needs to be expressed and needs to be performed in the world. Not this inner sense of who I am, but how we meet the world. We meet the world in an enlightened way. There is not true practice that is not an expression of enlightenment, and there is no enlightenment that is not an expression of practice. And there is no expounding of the Dharma that's not the practice of enlightenment. They all happen together. So this may be hard to grok, but the idea that when you sit, you are a Buddha, not because you're moving towards awakening, but simply being in this form, you are a Buddha. But again, this practice is not about just sitting on this cushion and enacting that shape and some sense of, look at me, I'm a Buddha. But instead, how you get up off the cushion and move out into the world and move through your life in all of your relations and in all of your enactments as a Buddha. Dogen writes, active Buddhas alone fully experience the vital process of going beyond Buddha. Our practice is to fully experience this, not to understand it. And that's key, because it's easy for us to get up in our heads about what this practice is about. Again, I say this all the time, it lives here. It lives here. Just surrendering to this organic path, allowing this dynamic, active Buddha to take form, is the vital process. So again, that thing that he wrote, active Buddhas alone fully experience the vital process of going beyond Buddha. So that term, or that expression, going beyond Buddha, is a common phrase in Dogen's writings. Dozens of times you'll hear or read it, indicating the ongoing nature of awakening, going beyond Buddha. Not just, here I am, Buddha, but moving off the cushion and being Buddha. Going beyond Buddha is an ongoing vital process requiring continued and continuing awakening. So Dogen writes, because active Buddhas manifest awesome presence in every situation, they bring forth awesome presence with their body, something that we actually do. He writes further, this is to abandon your body for Dharma, to abandon Dharma for your body. This is to give up holding back your life, to hold on fully to your life. This awesome presence not only lets go of Dharma for the sake of the Dharma, but also lets go of Dharma for the sake of mind. Do not forget that this letting go is immeasurable. Another wonderful example of what? What is he saying? But again, what he's doing is, like standing on a moving ice floe, requiring you to constantly shift to meet this moment as a Buddha. This is why there is this idea of the awesome presence of active Buddhas. He's saying that this dynamic, active process requires letting go holding back from your life. It's kind of like asking you to jump off a bridge in the dark. Just because we're living in the world of the majestic presence and dignity of practicing Buddhas does not mean that there are no tragedies, sadness, loss, confusion, frustration, craving, anger, wars, or corruption. This is exactly what and where we practice in those fields. All those things that we would rather not see happen. That's where we are active, embodied Buddhas who are showing our dignified presence. Out of this mud and water, as they say, the lotus grows. Again, a quote from Dogen, "The teaching of birth and death, body and mind, is the circle of the way, and it is actualized at once. Not in a Kensho moment, but in simply having that dignified presence. Thoroughly practicing, thoroughly clarifying, it is not forced. It's just you walking around, being present, being engaged, meeting the world as a function of this practice. There is effort made in sitting, in simply showing up. Effort is involved in just being yourself, but it's not forced when we practice this dignified presence. It's just because you have enacted this dignified presence thousands of times over the course of your practice, you bear that dignified presence. You don't have to be somebody other than who you are, reaching some higher state of consciousness or higher state of being. You just have to be who you are and the expressed dignified presence of the awareness and awakening that brought you here to this moment. All of this sitting on the cushion, all of these Dharma talks, all of doing the rituals, all of the forms, etc., are all you practicing that dignified presence and kind of, dare I say it, using kind of Sedona terms, realigning your magnetism in your body to be that dignified presence. Do not try to run away from yourself to be some perfect special thing or become somebody other than the person on your seat right now. With your doubts, with your assurances, with your questions, with your answers, all of that is your dignified presence. Everything you need is right here, now, in this skin bag. Be willing to be the person that you are. This is the practice of active Buddhas. In the end, Dogen is saying that the dignity of Buddhas is their ongoing activity. The dignity of Buddhas is their ongoing activity. Stillness without activity would be dead stillness. True stillness moves. I'm going to repeat that. True stillness moves. The stillness that we embody when we are on the cushion gets up off the cushion and moves out and meets the world, which seems a contradiction. If you're in motion in the world, an active Buddha, you're not still. But that stillness resides here. That is our dignified presence. At the outset of this talk, I spoke about how Dogen sees reality as not static, but active. I pointed out 3 ways that he sees reality. Reality as dynamic, reality as relational, and reality as enacted. So let's use these 3 ways of seeing reality to understand this fascicle, the awesome presence of active Buddhas. So in regards to reality is dynamic, Buddhahood, what he's saying in this, Buddhahood exists only as continuous practice. Stop practicing and there is no Buddha. Reality as relational. Buddha activity depends on beings, conditions, forms, and community. There's no such thing as a Buddha without other aspects of this world and active relationship with them. No isolation is possible. You just can't sit on the cushion This practice is dead if you're just navel gazing. Your practice is to sit on the cushion, practice this dignified presence, get up and meet the world as that dignified presence. And that is reality as enacted. Awakening appears only as bodily conduct. Walking, standing, eating, bowing, speaking, arguing, crying, working, all of those things. That is awakening. That's why Dogen can speak of active Buddhas, not realized Buddhas. What he's saying is that Buddhas are verbs. So I keep going back to Dogen, but he's not the only one I keep going back to. And one of the other persons whose writings I go back to a lot is Stephen Batchelor. Stephen Batchelor is an interesting author who has a very worthwhile take on this practice. And I think he aligns very clearly, although not in the same ways that Dogen does, or with Dogen. Batchelor talks about how his life's work has been to drill down into the behaviors of the Buddha, of Siddhartha Gautama, not the Buddha, but the person who was called the Buddha, and try to understand what he was teaching. And I think we can probably agree with the idea that there is no great teacher in this world who signs up to teach Muhammad, Christ, the Buddha, any of the great teachers, to say, I'm going to create a new religion. They all did their practice by saying, how do I meet the world? And all of their teachings are about how you engage with the world. Active Buddhas. And Stephen Batchelor talks at great length about and actually kind of reframes many of the teachings. So the Four Noble Truths are not the Four Noble Truths, which have this kind of vaunted thing, but rather they're the four tasks. These are the four things we have to learn how to do. We have to understand that suffering is inherent in this existence. We have to understand that we have to work on understanding the idea that craving is what creates our suffering. We have to work at the idea that there's a way to get out of this aspect of suffering to some degree, and that we work at the 8 noble practices in order to do that. This is what Dogen is saying to us. Whether it's in Gyobutsu Igi or any of his fascicles, it's all out there in the world that we take this sitting practice and embody it. Meet the world. And again, I would say that Dogen's real point, not just in this fascicle, but any fascicle, is that Buddhas are verbs. You are a verb because you are a Buddha. Buddhas are verbs. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about this?
I think the first thing that came to mind when you were reading all the Dogen stuff was let go and let Buddha. It's kind of a old recovery phrase. I really like when you started, the last 5 or so minutes, 10 minutes, talking about dignified practice. When you said that term, it just made me want to sit up.
Right.
Really, it's really what it's kind of like what you're bringing to life is your dignity. And, it's really a contrast because you could see, in a large part of our country now, there's an absence of that. So I think because of that, it's really important to practice in this manner where you're open to what others say, you're keeping your ego under control or down below somewhere, that you're aware of what's going on around you, that you have a sense of morals and values that you adhere to. All these things are, I really like that term, dignified practice. All these things come into this, being dignified as you're going through life. My favorite Dogen guy was, I don't remember his name, the punk rock guy?
Oh, Brad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Miller, yeah.
Yeah.
I used to like what he wrote about Dogen because he
Right.
brings some humor into it, related to everyday things. So he was my favorite. I remember reading, Shobogenzo, some of it, and anyways, I read some of that really deep stuff that Dogen wrote, and it's a struggle for me to understand it. I really need somebody to, like what you did today. It's kind of like a translation that I can understand and relate to. It was the same with Brad Warner, his translations I could relate to. But for me, to just read it, the Genjo koan, it's like,
Yeah, and I will tell you, even with kind of this frame that I employ when I read, it's not as if Dogen does not still prove a slog. It can be too much. This is why, I'll read a paragraph and chew on it for a day or two, versus just go, oh, I've got this down. I know what I'm doing here. It's still a slog. But understanding what he's trying to say, for me, has been helped by seeing that idea of reality is not static, and the idea that it's dynamic, it's relational, and it's enacted.
right. Yeah, that's the whole thing about it being dynamic because it is an active practice. This is a stagnant practice where we get stuck in one spot.
Right.
It's very dynamic. We're always shifting and moving, and the impermanence. We always have understanding of how that's going through our lives. So yeah, it is. It's very dynamic.
Well, when I'm working on koans with you all, the point is, if this doesn't relate to your life, why are you doing this? For a koan to have any value in your existence, you need to see this happening to you. This story is not necessarily about old guys 800 years ago. It's about your life. And I've often used that expression that, koans are like myths. They're not things that never happen. They're about things that happen all the time. And we have to see ourselves in that. When we say, be the koan, what I'm trying to say, what anyone is trying to say is, when do you see this thing that you're reading about happening in your life? And how can you meet it as a dignified being, as an active Buddha? That's the key. And again, my active Buddha is different from your active Buddha because I'm me. And Dogen is not saying, don't try to be somebody, some vaunted individual, But you also know, maybe you've gone to a party, a big gathering, and you've seen people walk into the room, and somebody walks into the room kind of unsure of themselves and kind of this. And then there's those individuals that walk in the room and go, hi, everybody. That's a different way of carrying oneself. And this is not necessarily saying you need to be gregarious and outgoing and, cocksure of yourself. You can be unsteady in any circumstance. But the trick really is how do you carry yourself and how does that affect how you meet the world? One is a different way of meeting than the other. And this practice, sitting on the cushion, being our dignified self, starts there and then moves out into the world.
Right. Mhm. Yes, well, I must say I'm in deep agreement with what you're saying, Mushin. I think that in a weird way, Dogen with all this stuff, I mean, all these elusive words and concepts and difficult thoughts and all this, in a way, it's just being subversive.
Yes, yeah. He's trying to blow
Yeah,
your brain up.
it's all about making you just you're crazy. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
but to get up, to go out.
yeah.
So yes, I must say that I thought that was wonderful commentary, and
Thank you.
um, uh, what it does for me is reinforces the teaching. So thank you for doing that, reinforcing the teaching for me, and
Thank you.
that's what I'm getting out of it. So,
Thank you.
uh,
Anyone else?
So, for me,
Mm-hmm.
more recently than before, because we've always talked about that this is a practice. And I've thought of it as a practice, well, like today, coming, listening, meditating. But now, for me, it's not just here, it's outside too.
Right.
So every time I go out and I'm part of the world, this is a practice. And when I find that I didn't do something maybe the best way I could, then ding dong, this is my practice. How could I have done it better? I mean, it's kind of the practice has becoming not here, but outside
And that's
my
very
daily
key.
life.
Yeah.
I go shopping in the supermarket and I take my practice with me.
Right. Right.
And I've found that I'm just becoming a much, well, nicer and in the way I behave with you. Not that I wasn't nice before, but it's just like I'm very conscious of it now.
Well, and I think that that's
And
key. And you said you adjust
my
your.
life is more enjoyable.
Yeah. And when you say you go out into the world and say I didn't do it right, ding dong, it's no different than when we're sitting on the cushion and see ourselves starting to slump down and go, "Oh, let me reestablish. How do I get back to the proper form, the proper embodiment of my Zen, my Zazen?" Same thing out in the world, making that adjustment, going, "Oh, I can do this better. I can return to my proper form of Zazen out there."
right.
That's the key.
Well, it's the effort.
Right.
It's the effort. So,
Yeah.
you people. I think many people think that meditation kind of gets you away from effort, and of course, it's exactly the opposite.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Well, yeah, and so many people say, "Well, what does meditation do for you? You're just sitting." It's an engaged,
then,
active
right.
behavior, and you have to see it that way.
Yeah.
And then you see yourself meditating when you're moving around. Okay? Thank you. Osho, will you lead us in the 4 vows?